Ben Sira is among the earliest of the deuterocanonical Old Testament books. It is one of the rare biblical works that was actually composed by the author to whom it is ascribed. One of the longest books of the Bible, Ben Sira contains the most extensive portion of Israelite wisdom literature. The original title in Hebrew is The Wisdom of Yeshua, or Jesus, Ben or son of Eleazar Ben Sira. The title Sirach is a transliteration of the name found in the Greek manuscripts. The title Ecclesiasticos, which probably means the ecclesiastical or church or book, is found in many Latin manuscripts and can still be seen in the New Jerusalem Bible, New English Bible, and Revised Standard Version. There is little doubt that the entire book was composed by one author, Ben Sira, who is a native Jerusalem. He devoted his life to the study of the law, prophets, and writings, and became a highly respected scribe and teacher who ran an academy for young Jewish men. Ben Sira wrote his book not for personal gain, but for all who seek instruction. He did not intend to write a systematic polemic against Hellenism, but his purpose was to demonstrate that the Jewish way of life was superior to Hellenistic culture and its blandishments, and that the true wisdom was to be found primarily in Jerusalem and not in Athens. Thus, the good Jew should not give in to the temptation to follow the Greek way of life. The prologue to Ben Sira is generally considered the earliest witness to a canon of the books of the prophets. Thus, the date of the text is the subject of intense scrutiny. The Greek translator states in his preface that he was the grandson of the author, and that he came to Egypt in the 38th year of the reign of Euergetes. The epithet was borne by only two of the Ptolemies, of whom Ptolemy III Euergetes reigned only 25 years, from 247 to 222 BCE. Thus, Ptolemy VIII Euergetes must be intended. He ascended the throne in the year 170 BCE, together with his brother Philometor, but he soon became sole ruler of Cyrene, and from 146 to 117 held sway over all Egypt, although he dated his reign from the year in which he received the crown, from 170 BCE. The translator must therefore have gone to Egypt in 132 BCE. If the average length of 2 generations be reckoned, Ben Sira's date must fall in the first third of the 2nd century. Ben Sira contains a eulogy of Simon the high priest, the son of Onias, who in his life prepared the house. Most scholars agree that it seems to have formed the original ending of the text, and that the second high priest Simon, dated 196 BCE, was intended. Struggles between Simon's successors occupied the years 175 to 172 BCE and are not discussed. Nor is the persecution of the Jews by Antiochus IV Epiphanes in 168. Ben Sira's grandson was in Egypt, translating and editing after the usurping Hasmonean line had definitively ousted Simon's heirs in long struggles, and was finally in control of the high priesthood in Jerusalem. Comparing the Hebrew and the Greek versions show that he altered the prayer for Simon and broadened its application, in order to avoid having a work centered tracing God's covenanted faithfulness close on an unanswered prayer.
Even if the book at times uses hymns, prayers, most of its part consists of didactic poems. Colley suggests a structure composed of 8 parts, while incorporating traditional proverbs and biblical passages. The author shapes his poem into neat literary constructions. Appendixes follow these parts, which end with a wisdom poem. Part 1, Chapter 1, verse 1 to Chapter 4, verse 10, Understanding Wisdom. Part 2, from Chapter 4, verse 11 to Chapter 6, verse 17, Applying Wisdom Personally. Part 3, from Chapter 6, verse 18 to Chapter 14, verse 19, Applying Wisdom Socially. Part 4, from Chapter 14, verse 20 to Chapter 24, verse 27, Applying Wisdom to Speech and Thought. Part 5, from Chapter 24, verse 1 to Chapter 32, verse 13, Applying Wisdom to Domestic Life. Part 6, from Chapter 32, verse 14 to Chapter 38, verse 23, Using Wisdom to Make Good Decisions. Part 7, from Chapter 38, verse 24 to Chapter 42, verse 14, Demonstrating the Results of Wisdom. Part 8, from Chapter 42, verse 15 to Chapter 50, verse 24, Wisdom in Creation and History. Appendixes from Chapter 50, verse 25 to Chapter 51, verse 30, which ended by Wisdom poem in Chapter 51, verse 13 to 30. The book was composed originally in Hebrew. The prologue explains the grandson's decision to translate the book from Hebrew to Greek, probably in Alexandria. The New American Bible and the Wisdom of Ben Sira offer a critical translation based on the Hebrew text as well as the Greek and Syriac text. The New Revised Standard Version, though translated primarily from Greek, utilizes the Hebrew and Syriac far more extensively than the Revised Standard Version. A deuterocanonical book, Sirach, though written in Hebrew and published in Jerusalem before Daniel 165 BC, was not included in the Jewish canon, probably because the Pharisees, who refined that canon near the end of the 1st century AD, frowned on some of Ben Sira's theology. His denial of retribution in the hereafter. Nonetheless, Sirach was often quoted, even as sacred scripture, by many of the later rabbis. The early church, including Diache, Clement of Rome, Irenaeus, Tertullian, consider Sirach canonical. There are many allusions to the book in the New Testament, especially in James. The fathers of the church attest more frequently to the canonicity of Sirach than to several proto-canonical books.
The all-encompassing theme of Sirach's book is wisdom, or as she is called in Greek, Sophia. In response to the crisis that Hellenism presented to the Jewish faith, Sirach asserts that wisdom is neither a human achievement, as some Greek philosophies promised, nor is she a goddess of the ancient religions. Rather, wisdom is the creation and the gift of the God of Israel. This is the main idea of his book, which he explores and develops in a variety of themes and metaphors. Like many biblical poets, Sirach's approach is circular rather than linear. His major themes like fear of Yahweh, Torah, and wisdom are interconnected to provide guidance for the right living and happy life. This is attested by chapter 9 verses 14 to 16, 19, 20, and 21:11. Friendship. On the subject of friendship, Sirach is influential and eloquent. He has more to say on the subject than any other biblical author. He deals with friendship in chapter 7, verse 17, chapter 9, verses 10 to 16, from chapter 11, verse 29 to chapter 12, verse 18, chapter 22, verses 19 to 26, and chapter 37, verses 1 to 6. As the abuse of speech brings disaster, chapter 5, verses 9 to chapter 6, verse 1. So a kind mouth or a pleasant speech brings one many friends. One must be cautious and test friends to see if they are sincere, for there are many types of fair weather friends who would turn away if one should suffer adversity. Verses 13 to 17. Various images are used to describe the value of a true friend, but Sirach insists that only one who fears the Lord will be blessed with such friends. In this shared human experience, Sirach discovers profound theological meaning. For him, friendship is not a distraction from God, but a gift of God and a symbol of divine human communion. A faithful friend is an elixir of life, and those who fear the Lord will find him. Whoever fears the Lord directs his friendship aright, for as he is so is his neighbor. Chapter 6, verses 16 to 17.